Today we're going to be book reviewing Empire of AI by Karen Howe. So just some back kind of round on Karen Howe, so who she is. She's a reporter that's like for some reason had access to OpenAI in the early days, and she was covering it even before it got big. So she actually has, let's say the best original understanding of OpenAI and kind of what is going on with that. And she primarily just focuses on OpenAI, although you will see over time that this does deviate into, let's say, a lot of the other AI startups, like the main ones, right? So, for example, Anthropic and XAI, because you start to understand these people are all connected. And this was a definitely pretty long book. I think it was like almost 400 pages, and there was a lot of detail. And I think it's really important that going forward, right, if this kind of AI technology is going to be such an integral part of our lives, right, it's very important to understand who created it and kind of why and what happened with that. So I'm about to, kind of go in a deep dive in here. And, me, myself personally, being a student at Stanford in the heart of Silicon Valley, I think a lot of the stuff that kind of was said made me think twice, or just made me really connect a lot of dots to similar behavior that I've seen or things that I kind of question. And so I will be talking about some, let's just say, interesting patterns that we might notice, especially in light of current events of a lot of different things happening in the US. So let's start to just get into it. I'm going to be jumping around a lot with just different things that I really noticed stood out to me. And I'll kind of explain why they stood out to me and why they're kind of suspicious and questionable. So one of the main problems that happens with Sam Altman, right, in general is just, if you remember, there's that news when the board members try to kick him out, right, as CEO. And so this stems from a lot about his character, which I'll get into, but let's just go over some of the stuff that I kind of took away and the background. So starting off with Sam Altman's early mentor, right? One of his earliest mentors was Peter Thiel. And so we all know Peter Thiel is a person who, created Palantir and stuff like that. Peter Thiel is actually gay, right? Sam Altman is also gay, which is fine, right? That's totally fine. So Peter Thiel was an early investor in the company OpenAI. Okay, that's fine. Sam Altman was quoted saying in 2010, or that era, that if there ever was an AI apocalypse and the world was crashing, that he would escape to Thailand with Peter Thiel. And so just from the beginning, this just shows you how close these two people are, right? And so this kind of sets it up for a lot of problematic stuff, especially given that Peter Thiel has some very questionable ties in general and very questionable activities, right? Additionally, right, so he comes out as gay in high school, which is fine, right? And his mother is a person who kind of sees herself as culturally Jewish, but doesn't actually believe she's a Jew, which is interesting because there's a lot of thought and talk about this idea of a crypto Jew, which is pretty much the concept of not acting out any of the Jewish traditions or practices or things like that, or the religious parts, but internally believing. And so that could also question and lead to, is Sam Altman, a crypto Jew, or like that kind of thing. But of course, we don't have any evidence about that. Okay, let's go into his first startup, okay? Goes to Stanford, right? Makes this startup called Loopt. And we see from then, actually, that there was 2 senior leaders of that company went to the board and urged them to fire him. So it's like the kind of firing thing that happened at OpenAI is not the first time that he's tried to become fired, right? And they cited his tendency to operate for his own gain instead of the company. And the other issue was his tendency to distort the truth heavily. Okay, so then he sells the startup for like $5 million. And then he begins to, start a journey of heavy indulgence. So he's flying private, he's collecting rare cars, and then he also starts to use ketamine, like many Silicon Valley people. I did not know a lot of Silicon Valley founders were using ketamine. That's really bad because ketamine is extremely addictive, and I don't know all the effects, but it's definitely a very hardcore drug and not good. It was used as like horse tranquilizer, if I'm correct. Yeah. He also has 2 brothers, and then also has a sister, which the sister, unfortunately, will get involved later in the story with a lot of scandals and stuff we'll talk about. With his other 2 brothers, he founds this capital firm called Hydrazine. And, yeah. So let me think if I missed anything there. Okay, so then moving on to the next part, Sam Altman was heavily mentored by Paul Graham. So Paul Graham creates the startup incubator called Y Combinator, or YC for short. Being at Stanford, a lot of my friends are, in YC-backed startups, which is just like let's say you want to make a company, you don't really know what you're doing, so you apply to this program, and what they do is they help you. They give you a little bit of money, they give you connections, they give you mentorship, and the idea is you're supposed to be more successful afterwards. Okay, so this is very interesting too. I'm just trying to, show you more sides of Sam Altman, because I think it's important to understand what this person's background is if they're going to be in charge of one of the biggest leading AI companies in the entire world. Paul, right, who's the head of Y Combinator, he saw, Sam, and he said, wow, this is what Bill Gates must have been at like a 19. So he really admired him. And he asked him what they should put on the application to attract more young people just like Sam, who are talented. Sam Altman says you should put, quote, what non-computer system, so this is implicating a more broad system, like a societal system, like, I don't know, the government or whatever, health system, etc. What system have you hacked to your advantage before? So the fact that this is non-computer is just really bad, because already computer hacking, right? Okay, you could say that's maybe, it's for cyber, right? People who are very good at like cyber defense stuff, right? And keeping us safe. But it's literally asking people, what system have you, hacked in the sense of illegally doing things to try to benefit yourself? And this is the question that he believes should be the most important for the Y Combinator. Well, you might be like, well, okay, that's fine, but hopefully he doesn't run Y Combinator. Well, unfortunately, he does go on to run Y Combinator after, right? So this creates a strong precedent of breaking rules in Silicon Valley, which is fine, right? So I'm going back to his question, right? But it's like this guy is now behind the most largest and important AI company. So this is not a good sign that he's, the question at a young age that he thought was the most important was what kind of rules are we going to break, right? And yeah, I think it just gets magnified with the fact that he's behind this huge company. Okay, and then so going back a little bit, Sam Altman was also able to help Peter Thiel a lot with his founders fund, and that ended up making a bunch of money through a lot of various startups. And Peter Thiel also mentored Mark Zuckerberg very closely. So now all of a sudden you start to see all these huge tech companies are somehow connected to Peter Thiel. Yeah. So Sam Altman goes on to be the Y Combinator president, being a successor after Paul Graham, which is kind of crazy because like that's really, really big, right? And then, he gives a talk about how to make a startup. So this is just some more information about maybe like his internal character. And he says that everyone should try to make a monopoly as a company because it gives you the ultimate competitive advantage. He also said it's important to keep your competitive technological advantage at any cost. I think we see this with OpenAI when they, a couple months ago, they said code red when Gemini, released a new model. So they're always trying to be at the forefront because they think that's what will give them that advantage, right? Sam Altman was known to be very generous in giving and helping other entrepreneurs. And when the Silicon Valley Bank shut down, he even sent a lot of money to other companies that were affected by it to help keep them running. At one time, Sam Altman was thinking about running for governor of California. Okay, so now we're going to get into a little bit of the kind of very scandalous side with his sister. So his sister claims that, money, and we can see this, that money changed Sam Altman's relationship with his family, okay? So his sister says that he wouldn't give her any emergency money for rent and that she had to resort to sex work to make ends meet. She said she saw the soft and kind side of him slowly disappear and become more and more walled off. She eventually stepped forward claiming that Sam sexually abused her as a child and that he worked with the rest of the family to isolate and cut her off, and she eventually filed a lawsuit against Sam. This was later confirmed by emails from Sam Altman to his sister. So I think, you can think a lot of things. You can be like, well, she just wants money and things, but I would just, like to point out that I think that it's very unusual for a family member, to be making these kind of demands, especially if the other person has, an infinite amount of money, because typically like the family member can be like pretty complacent, right? Or content. So, and given the fact that we'll see throughout the rest of this video, there's a lot of issues with Sam Altman, I think it actually does give some credibility potentially to what her claims are. Now, of course, there's been no official verdict and stuff. This is all speculation, but I think that it is important to not just completely, throw this out the window and say she's just doing it for money and stuff, because I don't really think this is the thing to do for money, right? in the sense of this is not the way to make some sort of lawsuit like this to try to, get paid off in a sense. Okay, now going back to OpenAI creation, right? So OpenAI was originally created to be an opposite of Google's DeepMind division, which was their AI division, because they feared that, get this, that DeepMind would become a soulless profit-motivated company for AI. So the idea was OpenAI was going to be a nonprofit to open source everything. Well, that aged very well, as we can see. That's my sarcasm. And like focus on winning for humanity instead of corporate growth. And this is why Elon Musk, right, like he was actually involved early on, and that's why he's so upset now, or part of the reason, although it is a lot of theatrics. But the idea is, oh, now it's no longer a nonprofit, right? Now it's like a for-profit company, and we're seeing it do a lot of this stuff. It's literally a soulless, profit-motivated AI company, the very thing it thought that it was created to destroy, right? Okay, so, but even before the company went fully public / announced their announced their just existence, they rationalized closing the company once they got closer to building the actual AI. And this was something everyone, including Elon Musk, agreed to. So even though they presented themselves to the world as nonprofit, internally they knew that they were going to eventually close things off one day. So Elon Musk saying that, like, Sam Altman's a complete liar is not really true, because he knew from the beginning that it was going to be like that. However, Elon Musk and Sam Altman both start off as co-chairs of the company, and to try to attract more founding engineers and members for OpenAI, they were given YC, which is Y Combinator, or SpaceX stock in addition to salary. This is really interesting because I've never known for one startup that they're offering stock compensation for a different company. I just thought it was really weird, but yeah. And yeah, so Sam Altman, Elon Musk, they're both co-chairs. They both wanted to be the head of it, right, in charge, because they didn't trust each other or something like that. And so this is actually why Elon Musk leaves, because, he tries to kind of, oust Sam Altman, and then Sam Altman has too many friends, so then Elon Musk leaves to go make his own AI, right? So the funny thing is, the current person for Anthropic, Dario Amodei, right, he was actually the lead AI safety researcher of OpenAI originally before he left. And the reason he left was because he felt that OpenAI was separating from its original mission of kind of safe AI for everyone. And so that's why he went and created Anthropic. Right? So getting into the beginning of OpenAI, right? OpenAI was originally very aimless in the sense they had a bunch of researchers working on anything from robotics to other faintly AI-related stuff. But they had a clear goal to be the first to reach AGI, which is artificial general intelligence, right? But they didn't know how they're actually going to reach that. So they're just shooting in the dark. However, what they did realize from early on is that they realized, like looking at compute, right? They realized there's an exponential correlation with using more compute and AI breakthroughs. So they quickly made this a foundation of their advancements and plan. They're like, if you just use more chips, then you can have more breakthroughs and more capabilities. This is very interesting because it makes you realize that I don't know if you would call that a breakthrough, because yes, it was a breakthrough in a sense, but there's also a ceiling on it because you're just pretty much adding more manpower. You're not necessarily changing a lot of other things, right? You're not focusing on, well, how can we refine the model itself, which of course they do, but that's not the primary strategy. And that's why a lot of people are arguing now that this kind of approach of just using more and more hardware to kind of power the model, make it bigger and bigger and bigger, and it'll be able to do everything, is not really going to work because there's fundamental errors in it. Okay. When it was proposed OpenAI become a for-profit company to raise more money. So, okay, yeah. Because they realized this compute thing of like buying all these chips was needed, they had to raise a bunch of money, right, to pay for all the GPUs and costs to reach AGI. And that's why they had to become a for-profit company, because you can't tell investors I'm a nonprofit and raise all this money, right? And so then the author, Karen Howe, was given very limited access. She went to meet the founders and employees, and employees were told not to talk to her, and security guard was actually given a picture of her face to prevent her from wandering around to other areas of the building. Greg Brockman, the president of OpenAI, had an extreme focus on wanting to be remembered in history and a huge insecurity in that area, which can be highly dangerous to so much power, right? So he just said he wanted to be remembered, and like that obviously can lead you to do a lot of bad decisions. Yeah. Okay, once deep learning started gaining momentum as a way to train AI models, it became the dominant approach and it soon shut out and reduced the diversity of everything else. We know from common sense there are always multiple ways to do things, right? And as such, the proclamation that deep learning is the only right answer must fundamentally be wrong. And this creates a sort of echo chamber in the field, which is incredibly harmful and limiting to other ideas, which may be more useful in advancing AI. A lot of other researchers who are studying other things, right, they just get ousted because everybody's like, deep learning is the hot new topic, right? And in hindsight, it's very clear that the following logic is so flawed, right? Dario Amati reasoned that to keep AGI safe, OpenAI needed to reach it first internally, then figure out the issues with it, then release it to the public. So this rationale makes no sense. It's like, okay, we need to be fast enough to reach the proper AI advancement first, then be ahead of our competitors, and have enough time to actually check that, then release it safely to the public while our competitors still haven't developed the first AI. I mean, that's just wishful thinking in reality, right? To better understand such things, we need to break down what assumptions have to follow to allow this model strategy to work, right? This requires that if there's ever any competition that arises going forward, OpenAI must be seriously faster in innovating because it not only needs to reach the goal first, but it must have enough time to finish its safety research of that goal before its competitors, who aren't so safe and like AI focused, right, do reach that goal. Again, this is also talking about research, which is an inherently unpredictable field since you can't predict or manufacture breakthroughs consistently. So I'm just trying to point out a lot of flaws that were kind of assumed by the company in the early days. Okay, getting into just the fundamental issue with AI is that the expectations have built up so high, especially for OpenAI, with Sam Altman's extremely competitive and ambitious nature, right? Being ambitious is fine, but when you begin to approach the boundaries of what is possible, some sort of reality has to hit and constrain you because this world is not a fantasy with endless, infinite possibilities. I agree that a lot is possible in this world, but especially in Silicon Valley, where I've been here for 3 years already, right? There is an enormous incentive to lie about progress and create a story that is not the truth. Everyone at the end of the day is human, and even though some people may be very smart, we very easily allow pride to blind us, and it causes you to make mistakes. Think about this. What if scaling wasn't the way to actually make AI? Would OpenAI admit it had been wrong? No, it wouldn't, because investors would all pull their money out. So as such, it's kind of like my way or the highway approach, where it's like we are the only correct answer, which we know cannot be correct. No one looks under the surface of things because it takes work, right? I used to be that category too, and the only thing that'll open your eyes to this kind of thing is reading books like this, where people spend a lot of time going under the surface, and like nobody will even read books now, so like nobody will even realize this stuff. We have to understand that the AI race is a really powerful arms race, right? And it's an attempt to control what could be deemed as the most powerful tool, in existence. This kind of power can taint people and make them act erratically and egotistically, often inhibiting their ability to make good decisions. This is very bad for these to be the people to lead the AI companies, right? But to be realistic, any human with that level of ambition who's going to end up in that company and willingness to take control will also have similar power issues and fantasies. So I don't know really the solution to that. However, the big problem is the lack of transparency that is widespread across AI companies in the US today. Because when a model is trained, right, specific details need to be released to the public scientific community such that the community can confirm and replicate the results. This happens even in biology. In biology, when you make a breakthrough, you have to explain how you did it so that way other people can copy it just to make sure that you can actually make the breakthrough and you're not lying. What is driving much of the AI craze is the use of benchmarks and test scores. Without transparency and the ability to replicate these results, these benchmarks and scores may not actually represent real intelligence and may instead just be reciting answers that are known from the training data. This is a very concerning thought because this means that the whole thing could be a Ponzi scheme that only those in the company would know about. And again, this could be complete speculation, but I think to some degree this statement is correct. It may not be entirely correct, but it is some layer embedded in a lot of AI companies. Another thing you need to realize is that these AI companies are using user conversations and saving them to train models even further because they are in a data deficit for the scaling approach to AI. They're trying to scrape as much data from every source as possible, even if it's a terrible source and it's not useful at all, because they just need more data. Because the idea is the bigger the data you use, the better the model becomes, and they want the better model, so they have to find more data. Also, a really crazy thing is that one of the early board members of OpenAI was a former CIA officer and Republican politician. which I'm just like, why? Because, okay, if you understand anything about board members, they're supposed to help the CEO lead the company in the correct direction. So usually you have a lot of ex-startup founders, other people who have run companies themselves. And this just seems really weird why this person's a board member, okay? And so it raises a lot of questions because, yeah, this just doesn't seem like what kind of value could this person provide to OpenAI. Another crazy thing is that Sam Altman never told his board about certain breaches that occurred in AI safety, which they viewed as something important and crucial for them to do their job as board members correctly. Altman also made an OpenAI startup fund, but no one realized until later that he actually owned the entire thing, which in reality OpenAI should have owned because it's associated with OpenAI, right? He also claims that he has no equity in OpenAI, which is true, but he has a huge equity in Y Combinator or YC, which is actually heavily invested in OpenAI. So it's like a loop, but he just is not in one part of the loop, so he can claim, oh, I don't actually have any equity. If you look at the clip of him testifying before Congress, he says, oh, I'm not paid, I only have enough for healthcare. Well, yeah, it's complete BS. While Sam Altman seems very nice and agreeable, right? If leadership within OpenAI consistently is like disagreeing with him, he cuts off contact with them for up to weeks at a time, projecting a heavy my way or the highway kind of vibe. Sam's issues got worse after the ChatGPT launch, potentially correlating with the power issues getting to his head. He would agree with both sides of the argument and then just secretly disagree with both sides, leading to mass confusion within the company and his leadership team. Multiple key leadership within OpenAI have said that there is trickery going on and it is stemming from Sam Altman and quiet silence and purposeful miscommunication and misrepresentation. They had also said that Sam Altman was a very anxious person who would say what people want to hear, but secretly undermine their credibility to prevent them from actually doing anything opposite of what he wanted, which is very interesting because it seems like he's just a super master manipulator. He also told lies that certain board members wanted to kick out other board members, pitting them against each other and filling his leadership with misinformation. People who served as a part of the AI safety team at OpenAI consistently keep leaving the company over the years as they realize OpenAI was blatantly lying about its commitment to safety, which makes sense from a first principles approach because if the whole company is trying to, in this competitive environment, just push out AI models, the idea that you're going to finish the AI model way ahead of time and then have enough time to, evaluate it properly for safety before shipping it out as fast as possible that's just bonkers, right? We all know that you're just going to sacrifice safety because this is a competitive environment and you're trying to be first and all these other companies are doing really well as well. So it's kind of realistic, but the fact that OpenAI tries to position themselves as, having this AI safety is just complete BS. From this, all this information, given that the founder has a lot of issues, all these problems, right? I'm predicting in the future that OpenAI will have some sort of large-scale scandal. And I don't know what that is, but I'm just saying when we look at people's human nature and we see certain individuals who have, let's say, a lust for power, who are able to lie and fundraise a lot of money through their lying and their storytelling, which is not completely accurate, and you couple that with a really competitive landscape, you're just creating a perfect storm for people to, defraud investors and create a huge Ponzi scheme, right? And so it's very dangerous. Another really weird thing is there's this movie called Her, H-E-R, right? And Sam Altman is obsessed with replicating the AI in the movie Her. And he even had the voice for ChatGPT mirror it nearly identical, such that the voice actor for Her actually sued him. But he claimed that, oh no, it was just a coincidence. A really kind of concerning thing is that Sam Altman really likes the Mind of Napoleon book. And he admires Napoleon's deep understanding of human nature. He thinks it's a key aspect for all founders to have. But personally, I think this is just highlighting his highly manipulative, nature again, because of the fact that he thinks that it's important for all founders to be able to, kind of manipulate others. And I don't think that's correct. And it's also known that, how he was so successful at raising so much money was that he would just, and this is very common in Stanford, people would just tell very big lies kind of about what their company is doing, what they will be doing in the future. And it seems like Sam Altman was just really prophetically, skilled at this. And that's how he was able to just raise so much money. I mean, if you look at how much money they're raising, it's just massive. And given the fact that they're not even operating at a profit, right? It's like they have no clear path to actually making enough money because they're spending so much. And as a cherry on top, right, Sam Altman, after all of this, then decides to fully dissolve the nonprofit to prevent the board from ever kicking him out again. So the board pretty much, they come together, they try to kick him out. But of course, this takes forever because there's so much confusion about stuff. But then when they make the move to kick it out, all the employees revolt, even though, they're kind of aware, but they're not totally aware of what's going on because they just love Sam as a person and they haven't really seen a lot of the bad sides of him. And so when you have half your company just try to leave after you kick out one founder, right, you're like, okay, wait, we can't do this, right? And so as such, then they tried to, find somebody else to do it, but not many other people wanted to do it. And of course, all the employees were like, we're dipping, we're leaving, screw you guys. And so they were going to all leave and quit. And then, so of course, they brought Sam Altman back. But now Sam Altman realized, okay, now these board members are trying to, screw me. So I'm going to change things behind the scenes so that they can never do that again. And the reason the board members did is because originally from the beginning, right, there was a huge focus on AI to benefit humanity. We're not going to be a company, we're going to be a nonprofit. And so the board members were actually told from the beginning their job is to ensure that this company, OpenAI, sticks with the kind of narrative of, making safe AI, right? And the idea was we're not going to be a commercial company. We're not going to try to make money because that would be bad for the future, right? And you can just see how they just completely lied about that and just switched everything, right? So it is very scary. And I think that, now it is something you want to question, right? You want to understand why is this going on with OpenAI? What is all the truth behind the scenes? And there's a lot more stuff, right? Especially with his sister, and there's a lot of questionable things going on with that. So I think it's just important to understand how things are created, right? For example, if you're using the internet, you should understand how Google's created, right? But if we're going to use ChatGPT going forward, you should understand how OpenAI was created. And so I just highly recommend this book because I think it's a really, it's a real expose on what goes on. And as being someone in Silicon Valley, I know that this is a very realistic story. This is what happens, right? It's never as beautiful as you think it is. And, this environment that we're in really heavily encourages just a lot of lying and encourages a lot of people to make things up because if you do that, you just get more money. And that's an unfortunate truth. If you have any other questions, put them down below. Make sure you subscribe for more.